Welcome to Shooting Straight with Brad and David. I'm David Klaus, your Navajo County Sheriff, and my partner today.
I'm Brad Carline, your Navajo County Attorney.
And this month we have a special guest, a good friend of mine, Brian Swanty, Chief Deputy of the Navajo County Sheriff's Office. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been on the job and kind of your career and how you got your start in law enforcement.
Well, I started in law enforcement in 1991 as a reserve officer for the City of Show Low Police Department. I worked there right about a year, and then I went over to the Department of Public Safety, and that's where I spent the next 27 years, retiring on my 27th anniversary at DPS just back in January.
So are you a local boy?
A little bit, kinda. I grew up between Pine Top and Mesa, back and forth. My dad was a DPS officer as well, and he transferred back and forth. And so I got elementary school in Pine Top, and then junior high in Mesa, then high school in Pine Top. So a little bit, home is Pine Top and Mesa.
Okay.
But I graduated from Blue Ridge High School in the Yellow Jacket.
We won't hold that against you.
But then you kind of raised your family in Show Low, right?
Correct. We've been in Show Low permanent since 1998. We've been in the same home for the last 20 years. Raised all the kids have been raised here in Show Low, and they're all Cougars. They're all Show Low Cougars.
Okay.
So I had to kind of change hats just a little bit.
So your dad was in law enforcement, you were in law enforcement. What kind of got you that drive to join the ranks in 1991?
Just growing up with, my dad started as a deputy sheriff the year I was born down in Maricopa County, and then he joined the Department of Public Safety in 1973. And so it's been in my home. There's always been a DPS vehicle sitting in the driveway of my house since I was a child. And just watching him and the people that are around him, the friends, the colleagues, I was led to do so. Of course, in high school, you got all these different ideas of things you want to do. But after I got out of high school, I realized that is the path that I wanted to take. And I started with the City of Show Low.
So what are some of the different responsibilities or duties that you were responsible for during your 27 years with DPS? So
I originally started out assigned to St. John's, Arizona, was my first duty station over in Apache County. And I spent 3 years over in Apache County working patrol, and then transferred down to the valley. I had a hankering to ride a motorcycle on the Phoenix freeways, and I did that. So I was a solo highway patrol motor officer on the Phoenix freeway for 3 years, and then transferred back to Show Low. And I served there here in Show Low as a patrol officer for I don't know, an additional 9 or 10 years, and then I promoted to sergeant. And they transferred me to Pinal County, and I worked out of Casa Grande, and did that for a few months, and then I went up into the valley and took over the East Valley DUI task force, and worked there for about a year before I was able to transfer back to Show Low. That was the ultimate goal, was to get back to Show Low. That was home, and then I served as the patrol sergeant here in Show Low for right about 9 years. An opportunity came up to take over the Navajo, Apache, and Gila gang task force, which was a new challenge to me, but something I had some interest in.
Why was it a new challenge? Why do you put it that way?
Just my entire background as a state trooper had been working patrol, uniformed patrol, so getting into the criminal investigations side was a new challenge for me. I've been arresting DUIs and investigating traffic crashes and what have you, and so it was a little bit change of venue, if you will.
So how did you find doing criminal investigations? Did you like it, or did you prefer your DUIs?
I really missed doing the aggressive DUI enforcement. I truly did, but it opened my eyes into a completely different aspect of law enforcement that I was very grateful for that opportunity. Dealing with the different gang members and what they do and their criminal activity, which led into drug trafficking organizations and money laundering organizations, and it really exposed me here locally to kind of the underworld, if you will. And then from there, I was moved back into highway patrol, where I was a part of creating a squad called the Northern Patrol Bureau Regional Advanced Collision Team. So I was back in the patrol, focused on the DUIs, focused on criminal crash investigations, and this was based out of Flagstaff. It's still running today. The program is getting some traction for statewide. They're looking at implementing a squad in the Phoenix area and southern Arizona as well. And from there, I got promoted to captain, and they transferred me into the ACTIC, the Arizona Terrorism and Intelligence Center, and that was an eye-opener.
So what does ACTIC do?
ACTIC serves as a fusion center for all law enforcement agencies.
Well, you're going to have to define fusion.
Fusion. An intelligence gathering. They gather intel there and then disperse the information out. Anytime there's a large event, anything, COVID right now, there's a complete unit that's focused on gathering intel regarding this issue and shipping that out to agencies so they have the same information.
So on a virus, what kind of intel would they be looking for?
It's a central point of information where the information you're getting is accurate. They're just sharing, how to be prepared. The numbers in the counties, different orders that the governor has put out. They prepare a document for all law enforcement when I communicate with a counterpart in Mojave County, we have the same information that directly impacts law enforcement.
Okay.
And then everything from gathering intelligence for protests and Trump rallies or what have you in the Phoenix area. I was there about a year, and I know I didn't even get a fraction of what that ACTIC actually does.
Where'd you go from ACTIC?
From ACTIC, I was moved back home. They sent me up to back home to Show Low, where I was the commander over the Northern Investigations District, and that responsibility encompassed 6 counties, all the northern 6 counties of Arizona, focusing on street-level narcotics to investigating drug trafficking organizations, and that was a challenge. The geographical distances was difficult. As a captain, I was responsible to respond to major incidents or officer-involved shootings or what have you, and it seemed like everything was on the opposite side of the state, no matter what. So that was a great job. It was a great job. I learned a lot during that time there. And then from there is when I made the move over to the sheriff's office.
So tell us a little bit about that move. You've been with Navajo County for about 2 months now. Yeah. What are some of your responsibilities and duties there?
So the chief deputy takes care of the day-to-day operations, supporting the deputy chiefs and supporting the lieutenants as they go out and handle the calls for service. Complaints or purchases or anything that happens throughout that office typically comes right through the chief deputy's office, from everything from citizen complaints to disciplinary issues to working in the jail, learning how the jail is managed and which is a much bigger thing than I was used to. My knowledge of a jail was pulling into a sally port and leaving a prisoner there. There's a lot more to the jail than that, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of operations, 24 hours a day,
It's nonstop.
Yeah.
It's like a city within a city.
It is. Mm-hmm. So what are some things that you're looking forward to or working on or accomplishing with your position here at the sheriff's office?
So what I like to bring to the table is just bringing some leadership in, is helping the deputy chiefs and the lieutenants and the sergeants mentor some of our young deputies. We have a very young law enforcement agency, in comparison to where I came from, and so my job, I want to try to relieve some of the pressures or some of the responsibilities that are on the district commanders, and allow them to put their experience onto the sergeants, and the sergeants can share their experience and their mentorship to the young deputies. that's what we're working on right now. That's what I'm focused on as we speak.
Yeah. So, you obviously bring a lot of experience from working with a large agency with the Department of Public Safety, 27 years in there. What are some things that you've seen change from when you started in 91 till what we're now teaching? Like you said, we have some young deputies that just have graduated from the police academy. What have you seen from 91 till today that we're kind of teaching differently, or how we're some of the practices of law enforcement have changed?
So back in 1991, when I first came on, there seemed to be the troops were self-motivated. They were committed. They were this is what they were going to do. It seems like as the time has gone on, this sometimes has become more of just a job to some of the folks, and those are pretty easily weeded out. They come and they show up for about a year or so, and they're like, yeah, this isn't for me, so that's been a challenge in leadership is passing on that commitment, that oath of office, that honor, what that stands for, what it means when you pin this badge on and you raise your right hand. And a lot of times leadership fails in that, where it's just a job. It's treated as just a job, and it's a commitment. It's much more than a job. So getting that philosophy passed down, through the ranks is hard at times, and a lot of it is the different generational gaps and what have you. We're treating folks different today than I was treated. In 1991, it was like hard. It was very hard, and if you didn't cut the mustard, then you were out the door. Where we spend a lot more time now with the mentoring and the leadership and making them understand why we do what we do.
What do you see as some of the challenges going forward? You've talked about the staff or the young officers coming up have a little different understanding of or motivational to it, but what do you see some of the challenges law enforcement is facing today, and specifically here in Navajo County where we work?
Some of the biggest challenges is attraction to the agency and retention. And when the economy is good, you look back through history, when the economy is good, we have a hard time recruiting police officers. When the economy is bad, when construction is down, when real estate is down, we have people standing in line wanting to be a police officer. So obviously we don't want the economy to be down, but that is the they can make more money, in construction or what have
sector,
you,
yeah.
In the private sector, absolutely. But so attracting what law enforcement brings to the table, and in society right now is law enforcement is we're in a downward portion. I remember post 9/11. Everybody was in support of law enforcement. They were in support of the firefighters after that tragic event, and then but it's cyclic, and we're kind of in the down right now. It's going to pop back up. It has for the last 27 years. I listen to stories of my father talking about the post riots in L.A. Things were down. And then in the 80s they came back up. 90s they were down, back up after 9/11. So it's very cyclic, and it's just capitalizing on the high times.
Yeah.
So what do you need to do for retention? You mentioned recruitment, but how about retention?
So retention, I think, is twofold. Retention is creating a good place for the individuals to work, where they're committed to the agency that they work for. But probably the biggest one is our pay. Is the pay actually needs to come way up across the board for law enforcement across the board. Being a government agency, a lot of times they get overlooked for other issues that come up, priorities that come up, and law enforcement, detention, and firefighters, they typically are overlooked, and I think they need that attention back, where we become marketable, where we can compete with private industry and with the larger agencies. That's probably the biggest issue here, is the larger agencies in the metropolitan area pay significantly higher than what we can offer across the board here in this region of the state.
And even if they want to stay in this region, if they go to DPS, they have a chance to eventually come back to the area. And I assume DPS pays much better than Navajo County Sheriff's Office.
They do. The DPS tries to stay within, 5% of the industry standard for the state. They're competing against Phoenix PD and Scottsdale PD and what have you, which pay very well. That is a challenge for us, for sure. DPS has taken quite a few of our quality deputies over the last couple of years.
It's just it's a market that we're all in, that we have to be competitive in. We just have a few minutes left. I wanted to kind of briefly talk about we're talking about challenges of hiring and retention and things that we've been working on for the past few years. But what are some current challenges with this virus, or the coronavirus that's going on at this time in regards to public safety or law enforcement?
So this is a challenge that basically nobody alive today has got any experience in. We certainly don't in law enforcement as well, but we're working it in communication with many other law enforcement agencies, with other governmental entities, public health, Department of Health Services. There is the communication that's going on between these other government groups talking about this issue has been phenomenal. We're on weekly conference calls and telemeetings and whatnot, talking about what are the issues and how to properly address those, because there is no expert on how to conduct or follow up with this type of situation. Right off the bat, when this thing first started getting going, the number one priority there was two priorities. Number one is a jail. Number two, not necessarily in any order, was the safety and security of our staff. And because the deputies, just like all the other law enforcement officers, are responding to their calls, they're going to people's homes for whatever the call may be, from a burglary call to a domestic violence call, and we needed to make sure that they were protected, personally protected, and the same thing in the jail. You take the Navajo County Jail out of the equation here in Navajo County, that has a very significant impact on public safety operations. So trying to keep that jail uninfected and keep that jail open to continue and push forward with our public safety efforts, that's been our biggest challenge.
So what steps have you taken to keep the jail safe from the COVID-19 virus?
So the first thing we did was set up a process for our medical staff. The jail has a very robust and professional medical staff assigned to it, and they were going to be conducting pre-screens of every prisoner and every person that entered into that jail. Including your detention officers? Including the detention officers. If the sheriff and I ourselves walk into that jail, we will be pre-screened before we enter the building. We limited the amount of public contact by utilizing technology with the kiosks that were just recently installed in there. They can do like a Skype or a FaceTime, if you will, communication with their family, rather than having family members actually come to the jail. So we're just eliminating the risk of somebody bringing it in. So we've eliminated all non-essential jail personnel from even entering the jail. Of course, there's the legal visits that are required, and the clergy. We've made arrangements for legal visits and clergy to still have contact with the prisoners. That's very important and legal. But we've also asked, we haven't demanded, but we've asked a lot of the agencies to maybe slow down with some of the more minor crimes, where they might be able to cite and release somebody and still accomplish the same objective. So reducing the number of people being typically brought to the jail on a typical day. Correct. Yeah, and that's worked. Our jail population hasn't dropped dramatically, but it has dropped where we're feeling pretty comfortable with that amount. With the steps that we put into place, the Navajo County Jail may be one of the safest places here. With the amount of the layers of protection that we've put in just to protect that jail. So just kind of going off of what the chief has, we've limited contacts and
people coming in, and offices, points of entry where we're all reduced to one. But this sanitation and the efforts going on in there with our nursing staff and our cleaning staff, where they're decontaminating between rec times, because if one pod goes out, then another comes in, then they take an hour break, do some decontamination that way, because we have a lot of segregation in the jail system, based off of classification for safety. But now, instead of mixing those in, we're putting a lot of those sanitation times in between, and then we've closed the lobby off for in-person visits and video visits there. So everything's being done in the home to help better meet the needs of these executive orders, and so we're not having an attraction to come down there while maintaining the same services. And so it's actually caused us to be a little more efficient in some areas, and it's also caused some adjustment in others. But
the jail staff has been fantastic, because that's a fine oiled machine over there, and we throw a couple little monkey wrenches in. It's got a ripple effect. But the jail staff and jail command over there has been phenomenal.
So what are you guys doing to help protect your deputies out in the field and other law enforcement officers in the field?
So we're providing the deputies with additional items of personal protective equipment, gloves, masks, and we're providing them with a solution where they can decontaminate their vehicles, they can decontaminate their equipment, because you put on gloves and you touch something, your glove is contaminated, and it kind of gives a false sense of security. But they'll reach in and they'll grab their ink pen, or they'll talk on their radio. Well, now that ink pen or that radio mic is now contaminated until they remove those gloves. They jump back in the patrol car and they grab the steering wheel, the gear shifter, what have you. So we've been teaching the deputies, or explaining to them, that they need to decontaminate everything they touch. So to include, their belt and all that stuff. So we're providing squirt bottles with a decontamination solution into it, and supplies are very difficult to find. But we found some vendors and some resources. We're able to get some of that equipment, and so after every contact, the deputies are going to be decontaminating the door panels and their patrol cars to keep them safe, and anybody that they may put into the patrol car.
Are your dispatchers a part of helping clarify what situations your officers may be going into?
Yes, absolutely. So we established a very short line of questioning where a caller calls in. The dispatcher will ask them if they are having a fever, if they have a cough, and if they have knowingly been exposed to anybody to the coronavirus. Three very simple questions. And we've had very good compliance with people. They understand, and that way the dispatcher can then pass that information along to the first responders prior to arriving at that house, just for some hypervigilance. They're all being very vigilant anyways, but now you just want to be a little bit more careful if this person has been exposed, or they think they've been exposed.
I'd say another follow-up question is, a question I've been getting a lot of: are we seeing more calls for service? Are we seeing more odd calls for service? Or what's kind of the trend going on right now?
Of course, there's always funny calls that come in to the dispatch center, some humorous ones, but our call volume has really not increased as we somewhat anticipated that it would. There's folks that have called and asked questions that maybe they could have gone to a website to find out the answers to those questions, but our call volume has actually stayed quite normal. And in speaking with the other department heads, they're noticing the very same thing. We are getting some odd calls, relating to coronavirus or what have you, but nothing out of the that's just ridiculous.
But we're not seeing any spikes between different agencies or different communities with different types of calls, burglaries, domestics, or anything. It's been pretty say flat or consistent from this time last year or this last month. We haven't seen any change.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been very kind of normal, if you will.
except except for life outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not so much. What are some other? I mean, so these are some challenges we've done there, but what about the community? You know, we haven't seen the large calls. Have you seen or heard many unreported things? Are you seeing many in your own personal interactions in the community, or when you go to the stores yourself, or your?
No, you hear on the news, you know, if you watch the news, you hear on the news that there's people fighting in Walmarts over toilet paper and you know, different conflicts like that. I've been to Walmart a handful of times over the last couple weeks, just getting a little item here, another item there. I have not seen any of that. Actually, I'm personally noticing people are probably more polite. They're helping one another out. I think our community here, that's what's great about Navajo County and in this region is people help one another. People are not panicking. They're treating each other well. Even interacting with the clerks at the different stores, they're friendly. I think everybody is doing their part to try to reduce the spread and just endure through this, you know, soldier through this challenging time.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of been my same interaction too with I've seen. But that's all the time we have this month. But we appreciate you, Brian, or Chief Deputy Swanty, coming in. Appreciate your service that you've shown here to Navajo County in both positions. And we welcome you aboard, and we're excited to have you working for the Navajo County Sheriff's Office and the great leadership that you bring for our organization. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.